Okay, so starting a new chapter. This chapter is pretty short and they relatively are connected from lesson to lesson. And so we're going to talk about, we've talked about linear, we've talked about quadratic, we're talking about our third and final type of function, which is called exponential. Now today we're going to focus on the difference between growth and decay. And one of the difficulties of this is they do not provide you with these equations on your star chart or anywhere there. So it really comes down to memory. So let's break down the two equations. Notice they are identical except that there is a plus and a minus. So anytime you see a word problem that is showing any kind of increase, and they'll use clue words to represent increase, it's exponential growth. Anytime you see words that signify decrease, going down, depreciation, any of that, there's decay. So again, increase, we're going to use the plus in the equation, and decrease, we're going to use the minus. Now let's talk about what the parts of the equation represent. A is your initial amount, and we'll talk about down the road the connection between that and a graph. R is your rate, and they give this to you as a percent. So something you have to know, of course, coming into algebra is how to change a percent to a decimal. Lots of ways to do it, but the most common and simplest way is to move the decimal place 2 times to the left, wherever the decimal is. So just some examples: 10%, 5%, 2.5%, 175%. Two decimal places to the left on 10% means my decimal would be 0.10. 2 decimal places to the left on 5% would be 0.05. 2 decimals to the left for 2.5% would be 0.025, and 2 decimal places to the left for 175 would be 1.75. Okay, so we'll talk about that as we go through each example. T represents time. This can be in seconds, it can be minutes, days, years. Where you just have to make sure you're reading each question carefully is if they talk about 2 different time measurements like months and years, you have to make them match up, but there's none that difficult for the next couple of days. We'll just be mindful of it. So if we talk about number 1, the population of a town is increasing at a rate of 2.9% each year. In 2010, the population was 11,346. Write the exponential function that represents the situation as growth or decay and identify A, B values, what they mean. So did you find the clue word? Do you see anywhere where it talks about growth or decay, some sort of increase or decrease? Well, I saw the word increasing, so this represents growth, which means the equation we're going to use is the A parentheses 1 plus the R raised to the power of T. So A is your initial amount. In this particular case, the initial amount is 11,346. Since it's increased, we're going to put 1 plus. Now the percent it gave me was 2.9. That does not mean I put 2.9 here. It means I need to convert it to a decimal, which means I go 2 decimal places to the left. So it's 0.029. And then the amount of time here talks about 2010 to 2016. So how much time elapsed? That would be 6. Okay, so that's my equation. Now, where you'll see this on any kind of STAR test question is they do not set it up like this. They take it one step further by simplifying the number in the percent or in the parentheses. So 1 plus 0.029 is 1.029. So that's simplified. And that's how you'll see it written. So then we talk about just converting it. So you type it in like that because you definitely don't want to do the math when it's exponential. And notice I'm just typing in the equation that I wrote, raised to the power of 6 years. And notice how not much bigger, but bigger it is. So the amount after 6 years for population, since we're talking about people, we do not want to decapitate. So we're going to go to the whole number, which means it's 13,469 people. Okay, if I lost you, let's do that again. A patient takes 50 milligrams of pain medicine after surgery. The amount of medication in the patient's system decreases at a rate of 55% per year. So notice the word decreases, which means this is decay, which means my equation is going to be the one with the subtraction sign. And so if I look at the initial amount is 50. Since what is decay, it's 1 minus. The percent given is 55. When I move to decimal places to the left, we're going to use 0.55. And the amount of time is hours, so 2 is my exponent. Again, we're just going to simplify the parentheses. 1 minus 0.5 or 0.55 is actually 0.45, and we'll make that connection to something else here in a little bit. So when I type in 51 minus 0.55 in the parentheses raised to the power of 2, I get a decimal as well. And in this particular case, because we're talking about milligrams, milligrams can be represented by decimals, not necessarily any particular amount of decimal places. So I'm just going to go to the tens place, which means it would be 10.1 milligrams. Okay. The number of TikTok users when it launched in 2016 was 106,000 people. The number of users increased at a rate of 65% each month. So increase represents growth, which means we're going to use the plus. The original amount was 106,000 and 1 plus because of the increase. 65% is 0.65, and it talks about after 14 months, what would the amount be? And so again, here we would simplify it to 1.65. So 106,000, 1.65 raised to the power of 14. And I want you to notice how crazy that number is, because it is increasing by 65% exponentially to the power of 14. 117,511,693. And since we are talking about users, we don't want a decimal, so we're going to round to the whole number, and that is it, technically users. Okay, one more word problem. After a sharp decline in the fish population at a lake, scientists worked to increase the population. So there's the word increase, which means growth. The initial amount is 104, and since it is increase, we add 9% written as a decimal is 0.09. And it's asking after 2 years. Again, we simplify this parentheses to 1.09. When I type that in and raise to the power of 2, we are talking about fish population. So again, we haven't quite sent him to the butcher. So we're talking about whole numbers here, 124 fish. Pretty simple, pretty basic. We're going to spend 2 days on this, so it gets pretty repetitive. But I want to talk about what it looks like on a star question, okay? So number 5, here's a graph, which we'll talk about the graphs more in depth next in a couple of days. And here's the function, okay? Now notice in the function, it looks similar to what we wrote at the beginning, but they did not put the 1 plus or the 1 minus. They put the number that you get after simplifying. And so the question, it throws people off because it's asking for the rate of decay. Well, the rate of decay should be the number that's inside the parentheses. So in this case, 0.76. And a lot of people put that as their answer. But that 0.76 was what came after I did the 1 plus the 1 minus. So I have to figure out, because I know it's decay, because it mentions it and it's going down. I know it's decay. So I have to figure out what I subtracted to get 0.76. I have to figure out that decimal. Well, what did I subtract from 1 to get 0.76? That would have been 0.34. And 0.34 as a percent would be 34%. Odd way of thinking, right? And again, I'm just showing you, but this is more something you're going to see. Number 6 is exponential growth. And again, that number inside the parentheses was what came after I did any addition subtraction. So I know it's growth, which means I added something to 1 to get 1.36. And I have to figure out what that is. Well, this one's pretty easy. What plus 1 got you 1.36? Well, that would be 0.36. And 0.36 written as a percent would be 36%. So the subtraction one's the toughest one because you have to think backwards. The addition one is pretty basic.